Well, good afternoon, everyone. Glad you're with us, and those that have joined us a little later, and those that are going to view this at a later time on our YouTube channel. I'm Gary. I'm with the Caregiver Foundation, and it's my pleasure today to introduce a good friend and a terrific asset in our community, Mr. Rick Tabor. And I'll give you a little bit of history here. I have to read a little bit of it because there's a lot. Rick was a Navy field medical corpsman with the Kaneohe Marine Corps Mental Health Clinic in 1979. He got a BA in psychology from Chaminade and a master's in counseling psychology from the University of Oregon. He spent 31 years in the Seattle mental health world and came back to Hawaii in 2017. Rick has been a licensed mental health coordinator in the state of Washington for that 30-something years. He's also a qualified mental health professional, a certified cognitive disability specialist, and he's recently retired. But if you were on a little earlier, you'll learn that he's not really retired. He's now in about 16 nonprofits and helping them. Among those, the Hawaii Pacific Gerontological Society, Meals on Wheels, Rotary Club, Compassionate Choices, the Alzheimer's Association, Long-Term Care Ombudsman Committee, Honolulu Committee on Aging, Faith Action, Long-Term Care Task Force, and it goes on and on. And we appreciate all of your involvement with those organizations. Rick has a really simple vision. He has a vision of peace on earth. Isn't that nice? It says here that his mission is to promote self-care while enhancing and protecting the civil rights of Hawaii's aging population through the provision of culturally sensitive advocacy, including a life of love, laughter, and dignity. Rick, we're so happy to have you with us today, and I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm looking forward to learning from you.
All right, thank you for that, Gary. Nicely done. And I really appreciate being here. You know, I've watched your foundation for years and years, come to your fundraisers, various things like that. Made some really cool purchases from silent auctions. We got the Snoopy, the animated Snoopy for Christmas. Drives my dog nuts. And Leanne, you called and you asked me to do something on resolutions, and what a great project that turned into. So I've taken, what I've done here is, I'll just do my slideshow, maybe pull it up here and start the slide. All right, there we go, sorry. What happened first off was, you know, I brainstormed all kinds of resolutions you could do. I'm not gonna read all those, but there's just all kinds of ideas. I am gonna share some research though about what folks actually generally choose for resolutions. So let's talk about resolutions. So first off, I tried to come up with a title. And so, you know, versus goals, or is it goals versus resolutions? Or are we talking about a life change? Happy New Year's. That last one is kind of a hint. That's the clue right there. That's the ticket. So as Gary said, I'm Rick Tabor, and I'm actually a licensed mental health clinician. And I've been in the field for 46 years. I'm retired, but still have an active license, although it is in Washington State. So New Year's resolution list. This is what happens to most people. Don't start a project and then finish it. Number 2. So one of the areas that I was trained in mental health more recently is motivational interviewing. I don't have that in here in the slideshow, but what that talks about is the first thing that happens to all of us when we want to make a change is we think about what that change is we want to make. And we think about it, and we think about it, and we think about it. And then maybe we take a couple steps and write down a couple of ideas, and then we think about it some more. And the approach really is, so this works with our homeless, folks that are chemically dependent, or just change in general. As a clinician, we just meet the person where they're at. We don't push them into change. We wait till they're ready. Something's going to happen, an incident's going to happen, and they want to try to work it through, and then we're going to take it to the next step. And so we pace it. So housing first programs are kind of based on that, things like that. So why do resolutions fail? So, you know, we got a small audience here. I can't see everybody, but if you just raise your hand, who's tried to do a resolution in the past? And then of those hands, that resolution that you tried to do, are you still living that life change? Who's still living that? Yeah, right? So why do resolutions fail? Because most of us have some failure with it. And the answer is the resolution wasn't specific enough. So just like that motivational interviewing, the trick is to break it down to as specific as possible. So one of the biggest reasons people fail is their New Year's resolution is because they're not specific enough. For example, resolving to exercise more or lose weight. Those are easy setups for failure, as they lack ways to mark the progress. So I'm going to go into this in more detail, and are unlikely to keep you motivated throughout the year. So losing weight is probably one of the hardest things we could do. I didn't take notes, but a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago on PBS, there was a wonderful Nova about weight loss. Anybody see that? It's worth Googling. There's some really new research that tells you what your cells tend to do and why it is so difficult to do. It's all about survival. Your body's just trying to survive at the weight that you're at, or at the weight that you were before you started taking weight off. So having a timeline on your resolution is also helpful. So thinking short term, so what I'm going to do today, thinking medium term, what I'm going to do in the next week or two, long term benchmarks, what I'm going to do in the next month or quarter, that will let you know you're on track to achieving your goal. So you have to break it down. So as a clinician, I always say meet people where they're at. I call it the funnel effect. Meet them where they're at. As we walk through and start working some strategies, you're gradually coming down. You're probably never going to reach the level that people really, really want to, but you can improve things. So they also didn't frame the resolution positively. And they framed the resolution with a negative self-defeating language. Okay, so all these steps, I'm going to go through them in a few different ways. So this is just the start. So if you're if you're approaching it negatively, that's not going to work. You have to be realistic, and you have to have some positive affirmations for yourself to get through it. The resolution isn't about the person. The resolution does not reflect them or what they actually want. They're going to do some generic kind of very global resolution that doesn't really tie into them. That's what we typically do. Goals need to be made for the individual. So you need to break it down to your goals. Maybe you plan to go to the gym, but you live maybe on some outer island, small community, or maybe you're here in a small community, and there's no gym nearby you. So, what's the likelihood that you're going to take the time to drive in traffic to go to a gym? You got to break it down to, maybe you're going to decide that, you know what, I live by the beach. When the tide's out, I'm going to walk along the beach. And in reality, that's what I've been doing with my puppy. Whenever it's bath day, I try to take her to Kailua Beach or Bellows and Waimanalo, or even up to Wailua Beach, and we walk on the beach. So she gets all sandy, she gets all, jumps in and out of the water, and we come back and we have a bath. And it's great, right? So, make it individual to what fits for you. Goals based on existing skills and circumstances have a higher chance of being completed because they're grounded in reality. Be true to yourself when setting up your New Year's resolution or any resolution at any time, and you'll have a more enjoyable and successful change or journey. Research has found that people were more successful at keeping approach-oriented goals, such as changing their eating habits or sleeping habits, rather than avoidance-oriented, which are motivated by a desire to avoid something. So that's kind of a negative, right? To try to stay with something positive. So for many years, my wife and I, we really cut back on the carbs. And so, we've heard people do this. So we stopped eating rice, we stopped eating potatoes, all that kind of stuff. We've kind of slid back into it now, but we did it for, I bet we pulled it off for a good, 5 or 8 years until recently. I don't know why it changed. I think COVID changed everything. Even if resolutions don't always stick, that doesn't mean the resolutions aren't worth making. So here's an interesting survey I ran into by YouGov. It found that people who plan to make New Year's resolutions were more optimistic about the future. There's even research that I found that people tend to, as they make resolutions, they tend to get them right eventually. So it's not a bad idea. I've kind of stopped doing resolutions, but I look at life change. So I put some weight on here during COVID, a lot of reasons, I won't get into it, but now I need to take it off. So I'm going to myself have to do a life change. So again, Leanne, Gary, thank you for asking me to do this because, you know, it's helping me frame things in a different way. So that's slide number 1. So then I found a good life is when you assume nothing, need less, dream big, laugh a lot, and realize how blessed you are. Appreciate where you are right now. We all live in paradise. You know, yes, there's bumps in the road, but dream the impossible and seek the unknown. But again, what I just said earlier, try to do it realistically. I still dream. The fact that my wife and I were able to move back home here from Seattle, that was a dream come true for both of us. It took us a long time to sort this out, but it's worked out beautifully. So again, just like resolutions, not a bad idea to dream. And I'll give you some specifics on that just a little bit. Of those who make a New Year's resolution, so this professor at University of Scranton, John Narco, says 75% are still successful after 1 week. After 2 weeks, the number drops to 71%. After 1 month, the number drops to 64%, and after 6 months, 46% are still successful. So half, almost half, are still doing it in 6 months. Compared to those with similar goals but no set resolution, only 8% are successful after 6 months. If you just say, I'm going to lose weight, but you don't come up with a plan, good luck. The most popular resolutions among the participants of this research was physical health, 33%. The second most popular was weight loss, 20%. The third popular category was a desire to change one's eating habits, so eat healthier, followed by resolutions regarding personal growth, 9%. Mental health and sleep came in 4th and 5th with 5% of folks in those categories. And the remaining 20% were working on something like work, studies, tobacco, quitting smoking, or other habits, breaking habits. So that's kind of generic. That was this research. I've seen different figures, different places, but I just took this to kind of outline it. So find a way to do things that you want to do, not have to do. So in all my counseling years, this has been my main message. And I have said it to staff I've supervised, I've said it to clients, I've said it to people on probation, I've said it to, you know, all kinds of folks. If you're doing something because you have to do it, you're going to be miserable. If you find a way to do it because you want to do it, you're going to do much better. Positive self-talk, reframe negative messages to something that works for you, just breaking it down. So at University of Oregon at one point, Albert Ellis came and taught classes for 2 weeks, rational emotive now therapy. Now it's rational emotive behavioral therapy. Back in the day, it was just rational emotive therapy. And I don't know if you know him, but rational emotive therapy, well, Albert Ellis is, he's not a nice guy. He's not alive anymore, so I can say this on a recording. But he basically half the class left because he's really rough. He's from New York and he's got a really tough personality. But his reframe stuff for positive reframing is incredible. I don't have time to go over it all right now, but I could share it with you guys later. Our attitude towards life determines life's attitude towards us. So here's a little example. John Lithgow, you ever watch Third Rock from the Sun back when that was on? So his character says, my human body is too fat for my clothes at the beginning of this episode. In the episode, he tries various weight loss strategies. At the end of the show, they always used to sit up on the roof and he comes out and the Jane Curtin character says, Dick, you lost weight. He says, Dick smiles, no, I bought bigger clothes. So every year, millions of people resolve to lose weight, right? Be more productive or get in shape during the next year. How to keep New Year's resolutions. I'm going to go over just several ways. I'm going to break this down. So I always say if you could take a global example and then break it down and tell it in a few different ways, it's helpful for us to kind of understand. So the first, again, choose a specific goal. Limit your resolution. So they suggest you do one resolution to start with, no more than one. Put time into planning the resolution. Write it out, brainstorm, break it down, start with small steps. So, you know, in our Rotary, we have a lot of people that do the marathon. I notice the ones that are successful, they start by jogging a couple, maybe 2-3 miles, and then they break it up. Maybe they do a short day and then they do a longer, go 5 miles. They gradually kind of add, but then they have a lighter day here or there. If I lifted weights, I'd have one day that I did my upper body, one day I'd do my lower body, right? Just to give it time to rest, things like that. Avoid repeating past failures. If you've already tried this resolution and it didn't work, don't approach it in the same way. Stop and think about what didn't work, and maybe what could I possibly do different? Maybe I'm not into bicycling anymore at this age. Maybe I do better just walking, or by golly, maybe if I took up swimming. You know, try some new things, experiment, trial and error. And don't beat yourself up if it doesn't work. And don't beat yourself up if the first day you do something new that it doesn't feel comfortable. It takes a little while. Remember that change is a process. So it takes a while and it's a process. It's nice to think about what's happened. It's nice to problem solve around it, but don't beat yourself up over it and give up just because it didn't work the first time you tried it, right? Maybe those sneakers that you're using are just really outdated and you need to get a new pair of sneakers. That happened to me. My feet just really got sore. And then my wife said, well, how long have you had those sneakers? Yeah, about 10 years. Yeah, that's what it is. Throw those things out, get some new ones. Get support. So support is really important for everything. And you guys with Caregiver Foundation, that's definitely a key message. So especially if you're going to do a resolution, you know, it's nice to have some people that you can talk to about what you're doing, maybe even do something together. Renew your motivation. So revitalize it by maybe breaking it down and shifting it a little bit. Maybe I don't go the whole week without rice the first time I try to stop eating rice. Maybe I break it up and do it maybe 2 or 3 times the first few weeks. Do it gradually. That renews my motivation because I'm still able to have it. Keep working on your goals. So keep working on it until it kind of feels comfortable and kind of works for you. And it's really a life change you're making. This isn't a resolution. So truthfully, if I were to knock off my weight, and I did before COVID, well, actually it was I pretty much had lost quite, I had a surgery and it was kind of serious, and recovering, I kind of put a lot more weight on. And then doing all these nonprofits I'm doing, I'm on Zoom all day long, so I'm sitting on my butt. And so how I have managed to lose weight is last year we got a puppy. And so every morning I walk the puppy, and I walk the puppy either 3 or 5 miles, depending on how much time I have, what day it is, and how I feel. I listen to my body. And if I'm feeling tired, actually, no, Holani's our dog's name. She knows when it's time to quit. She knows what's happening to me, and she'll turn back home if it's time to go home. So she's my support. And my wife walks her in the evening, so we take turns. So it kind of works, but it's a life change. So we'll be doing that for the rest of her life because she has to be walked, and she loves to be walked. Very social dog. So plan the specific tools and steps needed, and take one step at a time, celebrating each accomplishment regardless of the setbacks. So I do a lot around caregiver self-care as well. And so folks on here that are caregiving, at the end of the day, just look yourself in the mirror. And if it's been a rough day, just say, it's been a tough day. Tomorrow's a new day. Just let it go and move on. Take the pieces that you need to problem solve, but do it in a helpful, positive way, not in a way where you're, chastising yourself for not, I only made it a mile today. Well, that's okay. You keep working on it. When I played a lot of sports in high school, and I know when I'm in shape because I kind of get into a zone and it just feels great. And I know when I'm not because I'm struggling, and that's okay. It just takes a while. All right. So taking that and then just kind of breaking it down. So how to actually keep your New Year's resolutions. So this is a nice meme that I found. So stick to just picking one resolution to work with. And once you got that rolling along pretty smoothly and you feel comfortable with that, sure, you could add another if you want to. But they really, really highly recommend you just start with one. Write out a detailed plan. And this detailed plan, this is, if you will, it's fluid. It kind of just keeps flowing. You keep adding to it, you keep changing it, you keep modifying it. It's really there as a guideline, the Pirates of the Caribbean thing. It's not a rule, it's more or less a guideline. Just, let it be that. Try new goals each year. So if you've had a hard time with a goal before, don't go back to the same goal, try something different. And ask for support from loved ones. That's real key. The support, you want to find people that aren't going to put you down, you don't want your mom saying, you're fat, you're always going to be fat. You want somebody that's going to say, hey, that's great that you're trying something. That's wonderful, right? You want people that are going to be supportive for support. And maybe it's a friend that's going to go walking with you, I noticed in our neighborhood, everyone started getting puppies during COVID, and most of them did not return them like some people did. And they're walking together most of the time. It's really pretty cool. It's a very social thing here. This is Paoa Valley. It's really, the circle I make, it's the circle everybody makes. And we all know each other's dogs' names, but not our person's names. Hey, there's Nohalani's dad. How you doing? Right? So, and then another thing you could do if you want is to try a resolutions journal. And when I say about journaling, I've had clients that have journaled for years and years and years. I've journaled before I left Seattle. I shredded all my journals. I didn't want them anymore. Start over. But when you're journaling, if you find yourself writing negative things in there, I suggest for every negative thing you write 2 positive things to try to balance that journal. Especially if you're going to, read it later. Another thing people do, it's kind of cool, is write a postcard to yourself. Put your outcome of your goal on a postcard and wait and mail it to yourself later, and it'll come back and then see how you're doing. So just some tricks. There's a whole bunch of ideas like that. And then of course, again, it says, be realistic and specific. The more specific and individualized it is to you, the more success you're going to have. Okay, so that's that. And then, so that's me with Blue Thunder in my Seahawk jersey. I had them come to a dance at Seattle Mental Health. So I worked with, for 10 years, I worked with developmentally disabled adults. And I started bringing special guests. And at this, the dance before this, I brought the Seagulls, and their mascot Blitz came. Blitz actually called me when he heard the Seagulls were going to come. One of my staff interns went to school with some of the Seagulls. So we ended up scoring the Seagulls. From that point on, it was nonstop. So we went from about 100 people coming to dances to 400 people coming to dances, changed everything. And so these Blue Thunder came. This is actually on our campus. And then that year I went to the Super Bowl in New York, and I ran into them and they had me drumming with them. So again, that's like a dream, that just happened. It was just unbelievable. So I say you have 3 choices in life: give up, give in, or give it all you got. Anybody who knows me, it says I always give it all I got. So I like acronyms to try to remember the steps. So I'm taking the same steps, but I'm going to use an acronym, which maybe helps you remember. So it's the SMART criteria. So S stands for specific. M is measurable. Measurable is very important. So if you're going to lose weight, it's nice to have a chart and keep track of what you're losing. That's also will remotivate you if you actually stick to your program. If you have it written correctly and you stick to it and are losing weight. And if not, then you want to revise it. Achievable. So make sure it's achievable. So if I told myself that, I got something to go to and I have some old clothes here that I used to fit into, and by golly, by next weekend when this event is coming, I'm going to wear those clothes. That might not be achievable. That might be setting myself up for failure. And make sure it's relevant. So make sure it really fits for you and it's relevant to what's, again, realistic. And then time bound. So having it time bound is pretty key. So maybe what's more realistic for me is to lose 10 pounds in the next 2 months. Maybe that's achievable if I've written my program right. We'll see. I don't know. I'm older now, so it's not. I used to wrestle in high school, and we'd have to gain and lose weight all the time, and it was just crazy. So that's SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound. My first acronym I actually invented was working with youth at risk, and actually working with developmentally disabled also. I was at a stop sign with an incident that was happening, and a police officer in Minneapolis decided that I had to stop at the stop sign. I had somebody having a seizure that I was dealing with. We were there for 20 minutes at that stop sign, and I pulled out and he gave me a ticket for not stopping at the stop sign. And all the clients in the car, we were going banking with them, start yelling and screaming, he's there for, he sat there for a half hour. It seemed like he stopped forever. And I was looking at the stop sign and they came up with stop, think, options, plan. So if you're getting frustrated, if you stop for a few seconds, calm down, think about what you need to do. So this could be within a goal that's going on, and come up with some options. I always say come up with 3 options, then think about which one makes the most sense to try, and that's your plan, and then try it. So what you've done, instead of getting all frustrated and emotional and maybe even getting into an argument with a partner or something, you stop, you're calming yourself, and you're getting to a plan, because there's no way anybody's ever solved a problem when they're emotional. So we have to check our emotions. So that's just an aside. That's my first acronym, STOP. So all over Seattle, if you go into the schools, they all have the stop sign hanging up because I've been teaching it for years. What do we have next? So ask yourself, what will be accomplished with this resolution? What actions will you take? What data will you measure? So what data will measure the goal? So scale, maybe, we had a flood in our house a while back and we lost both of our scales. So if I'm going to lose weight, first thing I got to do is go buy a new scale, right? Otherwise I won't be able to track it. I swear my doctor's scale is 5 pounds off. Is the goal doable? Again, you just want to think about it. Is it doable? If not, you need to break it down into doable, specific steps. Do you have the necessary skills and resources? There might be something that you want to do. I set a lot of goals. I do a lot of things on the computer. It took me a long time to learn how to animate these words. And really what it came down to is I had to do a YouTube little class to figure out how to do some of these things, right? So you may need a class to get the skills to work with something. When I was doing in-home care, I was operations manager for a facility here, for an organization here. If we were going to assign someone to work with somebody that had dementia or Alzheimer's, kinds of things going on, they really had to complete a class if they didn't have the experience. And if they told, and it was online, it was a really good class that the company offered, really good class. I took it myself and learned a few things I didn't know. And if they didn't take the class, you knew it immediately because the shift did not go well. And, we would hear about it. And I'd go look on the computer and sure enough, they hadn't completed the class. So sometimes you do need a little more training to do a goal. That maybe that's part of the goal. That's one of the specific steps. And then resources. So, I might want to meet with a nutritionist just to get some ideas about not just how to lose weight, because you can starve yourself to lose weight, but how to do it in a healthy kind of way, right? So how does the goal, oh, sorry. I didn't turn my phone off. How does the goal align with broader goals? So if you have other goals you're going to be doing, maybe some of them overlap. So how does it align with them and how does it overlap? And how do you separate that out? And why is the result important? So that seems like an obvious question, right? But the result's important because that's how you know how you're doing within the goal. And it also is going to remotivate you. What is the time frame for accomplishing the goal? Again, you need to break it down into short, medium, and long time frame. So typically what we're going to do is, I always say, so I used to do treatment plans. We called them individual service plans for mental health. And it always start with something global, I want to not end up in the hospital anymore because I'm falling apart. Okay, that's a real global. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, maybe we're going to meet with the psychiatrist and see if we need a mood stabilizer or some kind of medication, right? Maybe we need to work on the coping skills, which is what I probably spend most of my time on. Maybe there's a good group we could do, some kind of group work, right? So, what's the time frame for each of these within the goal? Okay, so the two things in life you are in total control over are your attitude and your effort. So you can always control your attitude and get focused and your effort. At the very end, if I have enough time, I have 9 coping skills that I promised Leanne I would bring that'll kind of fit into this. And we're almost there. So I used to have these things hanging up in our group room. So these are ways to remotivate. People would read them. So if you think you can't do it, cut the T off and you can do it. You just reframe. That's a reframe. I can do it. This is especially for caregivers. You can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself first. The better you're doing, the better they're going to be doing. And so we have to take care of ourselves. In the beginning, my first presentations were in the Dimension Family Workshop. That's where I actually met Gary. I had a scary stat about the number of caregivers that pass away before the person they're caring for. I won't share that, but it's a lot higher than we'd want it to be. We've got to take care of ourselves. So this is what I was saying earlier. A dream written down with a date becomes a goal. A goal broken down into steps becomes a plan. A plan backed by action becomes reality. So dreams do come true. You just have to plan it and make it specific to you. Uh-oh, I can't read this. I got a bar in the way here. I got to move it. Okay, limit your resolution. I'll go over here with it. So again, one resolution is the best to start with. Focus on one goal at a time. Get that going along pretty smoothly. Put time into planning it. So I know we're repeating, but this is what works. It helps us learn. Make a detailed, realistic, individualized plan. So break it down into the smallest steps, you know, everything that you need to do to make the plan happen. Start with very small steps. And then avoid repeating past failures. Remember to change, that change is a process. Get support, like a walking partner, exercise class, have a friend join you. The exercise class could be a support group just in and of itself, oftentimes can be. Get to know the folks, make them your supports. Renew your motivation, always renew your motivation. So that's by just checking in, how you're doing, what's working, something's not working, you know, so come up with an idea of what you could do differently, let that be your motivator. Find sources of inspiration to keep you going. So you could actually look at people that have actually been successful. That's one thing in an exercise class. It's actually very true. Some folks have been there a long time. Some folks have just started. So checking in with them to see how they got to where they used to, how they got to where they need to go. I was in child and family services for many years. We would have support groups for the parents. I actually started for another partner who had a child and was Spanish speaking. I started a Spanish speaking support group for them. And some of it was not their first child. And so they were able to provide a lot of support for each other. And it was really magical what happened there. They became best friends for life. Keep working on your goals. Don't give up. If it's not working, just break it down into something smaller. Keep a resolution journal. Kind of take notes each day. Now, so those notes also could be nice to check back into. So like 6 months later, go read where you were. That'll remotivate you, you know. Make lasting life changes. So if you're going to change something, don't just make it a resolution that's just for this year. Make it something that you're going to do for the rest of your life. Very important. I worked in a restaurant and sodas were free when I was a teenager. I learned pretty fast that if I drank all the soda, you know, that I could, all I did is dehydrate myself and I felt lousy. And so I learned to drink water when I was in that restaurant. It was hot. It was in North Dakota. Our days could be 110 degrees and there was no air conditioning back when we were fry cooks. And I was assistant manager. And yeah, I never had weight then. So I'm not going to do that the rest of my life. So I went to college. So learn and adapt. What is resilience? Discover that and you'll be on the right path. So let's discover that. So challenges are what makes life interesting. Overcoming them is what makes life meaningful. If this can become vodka, you can become anything you want to be. Think about that. And rice for sake, right? How does that happen? All right, steps to becoming more resilient. How am I doing on time, Gary? What time do I need to be done? Good, okay. So this is just a meme. This isn't mine, but I liked it. So I put it in here. That's why it's a little bit blurry. Accept change. Find ways to become more comfortable with change. So, you know, humans are interesting. Things are changing constantly and we fight tooth and nail to keep them the same, but they're going to change anyway. We're going to get older, you know, things are going to change. Our body is going to, develop issues. Doesn't matter who it is, as we age, it's going to happen. Become a continuous learner. This is the secret to life. Learn new skills, gain new understanding, and apply them in times of change. So one of the things we know about dementia is if you want to be preventative, you keep learning new things. So if you do the same thing over and over and over, your mind settles into that. You actually do start to lose brain cells. But if you challenge yourself, step out of your comfort zone and try some new things, you're actually going to develop brain cells. You're actually going to use different parts of the brain. And it's just like exercising, you feel better. And it's just so helpful. So learning is constant. Like I said, I work with youth at risk, and they would say, when I'm out of school, I'm not going to have to do this anymore. I said, are you kidding me? School's forever. It never stops. You want to be always learning, right? So take charge. Take charge of your own career and your own development. So be in charge of your life. And again, some of that is you may have to do some positive reframes instead of, I always have to do this, maybe it's like, when I take care of mom, I just realized that, she's only got so many years life. So this is left. This is kind of a privilege, even though it's hard, a reframe. Find your sense of purpose. This helps you to assess setbacks within the framework of a broader perspective. So find your purpose, try to understand the perspective and what you need to do. So I decided when retirement came my way, I wasn't just going to sit and watch TV. I never watched TV even in my childhood, let alone in life. I was going to be busy. And so I found a way to stay busy, and it makes that's my purpose, is helping. So I became a counselor because I wanted to help. And that's what I've made a lifetime doing. We each have our purpose. That purpose might shift from time to time, but find that and pursue that. Skill shift, reframe how you see your skills, talents, and interests. So you might be surprised at what you don't think is a skill of yours that is a skill that could be helpful to folks. So always think about that. Reflect. Reflection fosters learning, new perspective, and self-awareness. So we don't have to be stuck in the past, but it's nice to think about some successes we've had and how we made them successful and how we could apply that, to going forward, especially during tough times. So again, like I said, look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, right now is a really tough time. In the morning, I'm going to start new, and I'm going to try a few things a little bit differently. Cultivate relationships. We are social beings, and boy, during COVID did we learn that. So develop and nurture a broad network of personal and professional relationships. It's very important. And I think that's why I'm as active as I am with everybody all of you that I do things with. I just really value that. Relationships are everything. I think it's just very important. And even an introverted person does need the relationships as well. So pay attention to self-identity. Form your identity apart from your job. So I actually, when I started out in the field here right here in Honolulu, I was working at AVAC, Autistic Vocational Education Center, SECO, and I was working at Halekipa, and I was working at, what was the other one I did? There was one other place I was working. Anyway, everything I did was around work. 3 part-time jobs, trying to make ends meet here while I wrapped up college, and I burned out. I went to Minneapolis, I did the same thing. I was working a kind of a PM shift, 2 to 10. We'd get off and we'd go, well, actually, we'd go hear people like Prince and Replacements. I mean, who we heard in the 80s was just remarkable. But it was with all the work people. And all they wanted to do is talk about work, talk, nonstop. I burned out. I definitely burned out. And I went back to grad school. And one of the things I learned in the counseling psychology program was boundaries and how to compartmentalize and how to have a life outside of the profession. So it's very important. I know as a caregiver, that can be hard sometimes too. Life is like a camera. Focus on what's important, capture the good times, develop from the negatives, and if things don't work out, take another shot. So here's one. I grew up in the Midwest, so I don't know what to do. The more I run, the more weight I seem to put on, right? All right. So I ran across this as an example. Meal timing. So it's not just what you eat, but the time of day that you eat that makes a difference. And so it's called chrononutrition. I don't know if you've heard of this. So it's a paradigm shift on nutrition. So don't skip breakfast. Morning carbs are better than late carbs. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Try to eat dinner early in the evening. So what some research is saying is, so it really is true that breakfast is the most important meal out there. If you're not a breakfast eater, some people wake up a little bit slower than others. Have something small for breakfast, but have a really decent lunch. But your smallest meal of the day really should be dinner. And it also should be, so that's where the least carbs should be. You want to focus on the vegetables and things like that, so less carbs. And they're actually suggesting, so this research said a few hours before, 3 hours before going to bed. Some of the research I was reading though is talking about, I think it was Harvard Medicine, they're talking about eating like by 4 o'clock should be your last meal of the day. You should burn off all that energy before you actually go to sleep. The worst thing you can do, and I've known this all my life, my dad had a real weight problem. And he passed away from unmanaged diabetes. It's really what happened there. The worst thing you can do is eat a late night meal and go to bed, because you're not going to burn any of it off. So that's the hardest thing. So again, make dinner the smallest meal. So try timing. So meal timing. So that early meal, maybe that's hard to do because you've got a lot of family meals. People get home at a certain time. Maybe your kids are actually, active in after school things. And so it's going to be late and you like to eat with them. So try to time it that at least a few times a week, you try to push it back. Even a few times makes a big difference. Okay. So sometimes we just need to change our perspective. I have a few funnies here. Dude's got it all backwards. How do I get to the other side? You are on the other side. And then to go with what Gary shared about me earlier, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. In this picture here, I actually took this at Strawberry Fields in Central Park, New York in 2016. I waited. Some people were doing the flowers. I waited. My wife and the cousins who were with us, they kept walking Central Park, but I was going to wait for this picture, and I'm glad I did. There was a guy that was actually, I don't know if you've been there, but they have 12 hours a day, people rotating, playing guitar, singing John Lennon songs, Beatles and John Lennon songs. And they managed to start singing Imagine, and I was singing along. I just got chicken skin. It was just remarkable. And from there, you're actually looking at the Dakota Hotel. I was kind of rude. We went over to Dakota Hotel, and I was trying to figure out where John got shot, and that just wasn't the right thing to be doing. I feel bad about that I even had that thought. Yeah, Chapman, who actually shot him, lived right up the street from us at Huanui Street. He was a neighbor that we used to see at Cromwell Beach. I didn't know him, but when I discovered that broke my heart. I was living here when that happened. And my wife and I were dating way back then, and we'd gone to a fine dining meal, kind of like a Christmas treat, early Christmas treat to each other we saved up for. And we're driving, and they were playing all these John Lennon songs, and went up to Tantalus, sat and listened, and it's like, wow, is it his birthday or something? And then they told us what happened, and it just crushed us. Okay, here's my 9 coping skills. How much time do I have, Gary? Okay, I'll keep going. So deal with your feelings. So feelings are important because they tell us what we need to do. To deal with our feelings, we must name them, realize it's okay to feel them, and then express them in a safe way. Then we can decide what to do to feel better. So even negative feelings, it's acceptable to have them, but we just need to reframe them, if you will. Adjust your attitude. We've been talking about that. What we tell ourselves about a situation will determine how we feel about it. Looking on the good side of things, having a positive attitude can help us feel better. And then discover your choices. In every situation, there are things that can and cannot be changed. We help ourselves when we choose something that can be changed and working towards that. Remember, our attitude can always be changed. Accept imperfection. No person is perfect. Nothing is perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. We can help ourselves by remembering this and then adjusting our attitude and discovering our choices. We learn from our mistakes. So I'm going to say this is probably one of the hardest ones for people, accepting imperfection. And then give yourself a break. Some people have a hard time with this too, in particular caregivers. So finding time when you're tired physically or emotionally, we can help ourselves get our energy back by relaxing and taking a break from what we're doing. Taking a break can help us feel better. I have a progressive relaxation exercise that I can share with you all at some point. That really helps. Even just closing your eyes and taking a couple deep breaths is taking a break. And then we were talking about taking one step at a time. When we have too much to do or think about, or you're planning a resolution, if you will, or a life change, we can feel overwhelmed. We'll do better if we slow down, prioritize, and take things one step at a time. And then again, along with give yourself a break, treat yourself kindly. When we're angry at ourselves or push ourselves too hard, it can make us feel worse. If we use patience and gentle affirmations, we can feel better. So accepting imperfection, giving yourself a break, it all kind of fits into this, overlaps. Plan ahead. When we have a lot to do or think about, planning ahead can help us prevent problems before they arrive. Planning ahead helps us to have enough energy, time, and tools we need to complete a task. And then the last one, this is people's hardest, ask for help. Sometimes no matter how hard we try or how many coping skills we use, we still can't solve the problem. That's when it's time to ask for help. So these 9 coping skills, I've literally used these for 30 years. I started from a game called the Coping Skills. I have a mindfulness game that I play that has 9 coping skills in with situations where we talk about which coping skill to use. I've used this with very young kids all the way to executive directors and doctors and lawyers. So this can be spun any direction. So I just share that this is my oldest, most favorite tool. Oftentimes we can't do things successfully until we first have the coping skills to deal with the bumps we hit along the roads. That's why I wanted to put this in here and share it with you. And I wrote this, so this is yours. You can use it for any way you like. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Rick. This has been great.
Thank you very much, Rick.
We really appreciate all of that. Leanne, I think there's a couple of questions.
Yes.
Rick can comment on those.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so for Rick, the audience is caregivers.
Right.
And as you are well aware, caregiving can be an exhausting, overwhelming experience. Can you speak about resolutions for caregivers?
Right.
What's the first step to make a resolution? What are some key takeaways, some nuggets that our caregivers can take with them when we end the Zoom call?
Well, there's so many, but I think the very first thing that I was kind of mentioning here is finding a way to be able to take care of yourself, even though, you know, the demands of caregiving are so great. If you're doing it all alone, one of the first steps might be how to figure out who else can help. What are ways that, you know, you can find help. So when I was doing in-home care, you know, our shifts, the mandatory, the shortest shift was 4 hours. So maybe have someone come in for 4 hours so you could actually go for a walk or go just grocery shopping might be relaxing, or go to church or go see a movie or something, you know, find ways that you could take care of yourself and feel comfortable about it. So I think that's the first thing for caregivers. I think what tends to happen is we're working so hard and the time goes by so fast that next thing you know, we've had like 3 straight days, you know, barely gotten any sleep ourselves because maybe the person wanders even, right? And so you're not going to make it if you keep going that way. And so again, that pitcher, you know, you've got to fill it up before you can actually pour it, right? So how do you keep yourself, you know, feeling healthy, feeling grounded? The other is giving permission for, you know, the hardness that is for being what it is. So what I mean there is kids, when they're born and you're caregiving them, they're going to learn, they're going to grow, they're going to develop, they're going to become independent. With our kapuna, it's just the opposite. They're shutting down, their body's closing up, they're not necessarily going to learn. And so it's going to go the opposite. And so accepting that and understanding that's just where that person is and trying, this is the hardest thing. This is really easy to do. I do it myself. That was my brother that was just calling. I'm sure he's going to push some buttons because that's just what he does. By now it's he's drunk. That's what happens. And so he's calling to vent about something because my mom's in a nursing home. And so he's dealing with that and he's having a very hard time with it. And so what I have to do is And what we have to do is to not personalize that stuff. This is not about me and him and my relationship. This is about something that's going on outside of me. Dementia is not about you and their relationship. It's the dementia that's taking them down this road, and giving it permission to be what that is and trying not to get sucked into it. Now, again, that's really easy to say, but that's why I gave you the 9 coping skills. So practicing the 9 coping skills, you'll find that, I just read through it. You're like, yeah, that's all just common sense. Go ahead, try to apply it and see what happens. And then keep applying it. And you'll find eventually that it really is going to help. So there's a couple of ideas. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. Do any of our
The other is actually make sure you continue to do your physicals with your doctor and make sure that your own body is doing okay. And if not, that you follow doctor's advice to make sure that you're staying healthy. Too many are dying doing caregiving, and that's not fair. That's just not, but it is what it is. I'm sorry, Leanne. Then what else?
No, I wanted to ask our other caregivers if they have a question or something they would like to add to the conversation.